Welcome to Colney Talk Podcast.
Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome to another exciting episode of Colney Talk Podcast, your buy-side breakdown show. I'm your host Alex. First-time listeners, glad to have you here. And to my returning guests, thank you for sticking with me. As always, I talk a bit about the Arsenal match and pick out my top 3 Arsenal players who shined and one odd player, not good enough, I get to call out. Liverpool versus Arsenal, 1 versus 2. I'm glad it ended up in a 2-2 draw at Anfield because I'll be honest, I had given up watching the game because the first half was unwatchable. I couldn't endure the disappointment much longer and there was no excitement at all. But thankfully, Arsenal overcame a 2-goal deficit because it was looking like a potential nightmare for sure. But then it turned into a statement of resolve. Martinelli, Trossard, Odegaard, they played pivotal roles in our second half resurgence, and I think credit to them to fighting back. As I said earlier, first half was difficult to watch. Arsenal looked completely out of sorts, leaving Liverpool, especially in their intensity department. We could not match them. It felt troubling. The team looked disconnected, passing combinations, breaking down far too easily, and Liverpool finding spaces, following sloppy, misplaced balls. Even when we could have completely corrected this poor display, we looked so entangled with hesitation. We would drive into the final thirds, pass, and then stop. Yes, there's a wall in front of them, but I think in any sense of confidence or not being sure, fire off a shot. I'm not saying hoove it, but fire off a shot. It doesn't matter. It would show determination. It would show some instincts. Far too many times then I could recall the boys would drive into the box, drive into the edge. I know that's how the defensive shapes allowed it to make those crosses. I mean, that's the cry, that's the scream. It's not that I'm saying make it easy, but the output really determines how much you can go back and recycle and do the same thing. And I couldn't really understand the hesitation. I mean, why is that? Why are the players looking for a certain opening to fire up a shot when you're playing a quality team like this? When we've played different teams, when we've gone through, different low block positioning that we would find difficulties of what we could do. And yes, those crosses were coming in, but I think a lot of times those reactions require us to give them some show of strength when we fire up the shots, make those attempts, because you can never determine where those rebounds will fall. You can never determine how those things will turn out. Ultimately, it puts the defense a lot of pressure. It makes them respect you, respect exactly what you would do. But it felt like we were so predictable. We would drive into the box, drive it around the edge, pass, and then we would get dispossessed, and then we're fighting back to gain repossession. It felt like the same old story, and that's just one part of the game. But every other thing just, compounded on the top and felt like they were not really ready to fight. And we looked so vulnerable. The spacing between our center backs, so inconsistent, and Liverpool exploited the gaps ruthlessly. One part of me felt like this was a good lesson in the sense that we would have to take this as a way to discipline ourselves when we're playing with quality teams, which we will face and continue to. And I think for us to get better, we have to learn from this even much more, because if we drop levels or think that there is any standards below this, that's a problem. When Gakpo headed home that cross, it clearly showed the team was not reactive enough, and there wasn't anyone to call out a heads-up play, something that Big Gabby or some of the other defensive nature of what they have as a collective would do. I mean, we allowed far too much freedom for them in the box. I hadn't seen this much, poor performance from the team in a while. I know this so much on the backs of what they've come from as far as their last defeat from PSG, but it was troubling. And then rather than regrouping, we immediately surrendered possession from the restart and then allowed Liverpool to cut through us yet again. Diaz guided the ball with ease, which Szoboszlai found space to deliver that square pass. I think if we left it rolling, it probably would have gone in. 2 goals down within 87 seconds of the first goal. This was kind of defensive blunder that screamed of a team that were fully exhausted. Can you blame them? But then again, this is where you have quality depth good players that would come off the bench and would not drop the levels. It's an old cry, so I'm not really going to go on here. Our build-up play was equally troubling. Liverpool's press forced us into a rush decision, which, kind of resulted in poor ball retention for the most part. We couldn't establish any meaningful possession in Liverpool's half. And when we did venture forward, our attacking lacked conviction. The decision-making in the final third, as I said, was hesitant, with our players taking extra touches. Extratouches.com. I mean, we got to stop this. But rather than the players, making those decisive shots, not passes anymore, I mean, for goodness sake, we could not even do any of that. And I go forward with more of this question. How can we change this behavior? We have dribblers like Saka and Martinelli who can do a lot of those extra touches to create space and make their shots. We have Trossard in that same department, but at the same time, we need to have a lot more ruthlessness when it comes to shooting. We should not be allergic to shooting the ball one touch less, not one touch more. It shouldn't be perfect. I've said this time and again, and I stand on that ground. It doesn't matter what it is, because that's where you start building your momentum. That's where you start making that feeling come into everyone. The team has already proved their confidence in how they would slice through press, slice through any kinds of blocks that the opposition would give us, Arsenal. But then when we get right into the box to do something, it doesn't matter if there are 50 or 60 people behind that keeper. Fire off that shot, because when they come to our own box, they are not hesitating at all. So we should not do any of that. It's not for perfection. And I don't know what is driving that influence. I'm not going to point fingers, but I really want to rant on this a little bit more, but it's a little bit too much. I'm hoping that there is some players that would come in and change this influence of extra touches in the box. We need to be very decisive where we fire enough shots and not thinking so much about it, because when we do think about it, we're coming back with recycled balls and suffering with all the efforts that we built up to end up losing and not having anything to come away with. I mean, think about it. We don't have anything to lose when we fire off a shot, even if it doesn't seem in the perfect way as they try to find it. Because when we do, we lose the ball anyway. So why not do the one that is much simpler? Drive into the box and just let it go. Let it rip. It's easier when they're crosses. It should be easier as well when they're shots. That's just me, because the confidence, the control, the defensive discipline, they all come together. But for us, it all seemed to have evaporated. Liverpool, to their credit, they fed off the energy of the crowd and they suffocated us with their intensity. By halftime, a 2-goal deficit actually felt like we had gotten off lightly, because Raya saved us a couple of those would-be goals because we were struggling. Second half, the team looked like it was as if this was their first half kickoff. Whatever Halloran, Arteta had done, giving them at halftime, they worked wonders, because Arsenal looked like a completely different team with urgency. They had purpose. They were relentless. The transformation was almost immediate when Martinelli nodded home just minutes after the restart to breathe life into us as far as showing up for this game. Our forward line positioning was, different, because Martinelli now operating more in the central role, making the runs, and that stretched Liverpool's defense. And then you had Trossard, who was doing a lot of the playmaking, drifted to the left flank, and he found himself more space to do more of that. And this tweak, it definitely created better balance as far as our attacking unit, and it gave Liverpool that, challenge as far as defending a bit more, and it worked in our favor. And then our midfield, we were reacting a lot. We kept doing that, but it gave us a little bit more footing as far as establishing some control when we would lose possession, but then, minimize press when it would drive right into our own half and get to our final third. And that's where we try to control the chaos that we couldn't do in the first half. We handled the press much better, even though it was still a challenge. Odegaard, Merino, and Ben White began doing more things in the pockets of space that they had between lines, and you would see Miles Lewis-Kelly swap between himself and Kivior in some of those drives and runs that, he had to, deal with as far as Salah. So that was some other consideration that they had to manage. And then we had an equalizer, which started from Odegaard's powerful strike. Powerful strike. It forced the save onto the post, and then Merino was perfectly positioned to capitalize on the rebound to score. And again, this is what I'm saying. We have had this in our locker. We've waited and waited, but when we have nothing to lose, then that's when it comes out. Something we should be doing. We should have done games before that cost us games and points. But here we are doing it when we're now trailing. Soon after Merino's dismissal for a second yellow, reduced us to 10 man. And that kind of threw a wrench in the whole situation because we had to buckle down for extended defending, away from home. And I guess that's what we had to deal with. Anfield crowd pushed their players. After we overturned a 2-goal deficit, there was a lot more work to be done. The composure under pressure, the determination to fight back, that was pure credit to the players. We were fully stretched. It was so evident that Arteta and the team had to figure out the makeshift players to keep us afloat. And then you had Tierney, Calafiori, and Zinchenko coming to help in that way. And there was a collective understanding of the team having to dig deep and hold the position that they were in. In fact, it was to try and go forward to snatch a win. The final play from a corner could have gone against us so easily, to losing the game after everything, to how we had fought back and tried to, maintain something, because Liverpool scored. But then thankfully the correct call was made to cancel that, because that corner kick, we just were suppressed and there was no way we defended very well, and it gave us that breathing life and we left with a point, and that was a whistle. It really helped us fight back and gain some meaning from playing the champions right now. And if we lost in this fashion, it would have hurt us much more than the game itself, but thankfully that wasn't the case. Okay, moving straight to my top 3 Arsenal players in this match. First guy, Martinelli. He was flying in this match. Certainly the top performer. We all know what he does on the wing. Caused a lot of problems, but it wasn't quite connecting on the end of the crosses that he was delivering. Granted, it was Trossard in the middle, and his size and his height would not make it any, easy for that to happen. And then his positional change proved to be the lift that we needed to get back into the game, and Martinelli gave us that advantage in attack in terms of his pace and driving forward to keep us pressing on. His runs behind Liverpool's defensive line put them in constant pressure, especially on Konate, because after that header, it gave him a lot more room to keep pounding and staying on top of it. And speaking of that goal, it felt simple, really. I guess we just had to keep it simple that way. But, good on him, because even when we went down to 10 men, he just kept going. And he continued going. And the combination of his pace, direct running, it helped us manage the blitz from Liverpool a little bit more. And, I guess that's the antidote to bringing down a little bit of the noise that they would feed the ball to Salah and have us fully exposed in so many times, which we were. But, he did play a good game, so good on him. Second player, Trossard. He was instrumental in our comeback. His creativity was on display even before that weighted cross for Martinelli's goal that changed the whole momentum of the match. I think Trossard's overall performance was so much like the playmaker that had to start things off in the game, at least the way I looked at it. But I think it felt disconnected in the position that he was in, but he did his own thing. Throughout the game, he had to drop deep and carry the ball a lot, which pulled Liverpool defenders out of position, but not so much, because it was specifically Konate that was drawn around a few times. But again, as I alluded, Trossard's height and his size limited him in some ways, but his effect and influence in how we tried to create something was good, because the passing combination that he generated helped us get out from some traps and drive forward even when we didn't have someone up top holding off the ball or giving us a lot of those rooms to drive forward quicker. The adjustments that we had for him to switch positions after halftime was much better suited for him, and he appeared in central areas that was feeding to him, and as it called for it anyway. And you'll see him drift wide, and then the next coming back to connect with Odegaard and Merino. So, that unpredictability helped us, which we lacked as we were in the final third in some situations. So, it was great. The only slight concern now is with Trossard and his late exit, unable to complete the play because of his injury on his leg. So that's my worry there. I hope he recovers in time for the next match, because this is the biggest match now for the season, in my opinion, as it turns out. But fingers crossed. Third and final player, Odegaard. He was making some dangerous passes that commanded respect. I think the physicality part of the game and the press was sort of getting him off his comfort in some plays, but not a lot. It felt a little bit rushed. But that thunderous strike, though, that led to the equalizer from Merino, it's a welcome feature that I believe he needs to do more of. It took a fantastic save from Alisson to push it onto that post, because similar to the PSG shot he had, I said to myself, where has this type of shot been? Take more of it. Low driven, in fact. It's what's needed. Again, it does not have to be perfect. You just have a slight window, fire it off. You can be the front players can be the decoy that gives you room to do that. It feels like it has become so predictable when he drives to the edge of the box, runs, and lays it off to someone else. I know it can be some level of selflessness, but my goodness, it was this shot that led to the rebound that gave us the chance to get back into the game. How much more we would have had a little bit more of this earlier. So again, it speaks for itself. Another moment where he drove forward and his other shot just went wide of the post, and seeing the reaction, that's what I'm talking about. It speaks of what is to come, and what feels like you're knocking on the door and you're pushing and you get the result. It's not insanity, it's belief, it's understanding of how and what it takes to get to those achievements and those goals, and having the combination of the other players come in and do the same thing. Those little things build momentum. You've heard me say that, and belief, which the players would feed off of, because they see you take those kind of shots, they join the party and do the same thing, and then the short parties, and it wouldn't be so much about the XG, but then everything else that would lead to contributing to those goals to come in. That's just how I see it. There are other plays that he had on the right that invited more attempts from Ben White and Saka, and I think, again, that's how we started building up that belief and fighting back and trying to win the game. And credit to him. So overall, I would say he showed up, and as a captain, he didn't disappoint. It's true, Arsenal's first half performance was horrible, and there are defensive issues that were shocking, but the character to fight back from 2 goals down at Anfield, it's a reminder that this team, their quality and where they are is not by luck. They have done everything in their power to stay there. So coming away with a point after such a difficult start, particularly ending the game with 10 men, is way better than a loss, a close one even at that. So there's a lot to put in perspective there. Now it's 2 games left. This result could prove pivotal, not just the point gained, but to ensure that we retain our position. It is incredibly difficult on what the team has gone through this past week. That fighting spirit, that refusal to surrender, gives us more hope for what is ahead and how we would come back even much stronger. But overall, making sure that this is what the culture of the team is about. So I give them credit for that, and kudos to them to make this more of a positive than what it should have been. So big ups to them. And with that, folks, I'll wrap it here. Thank you all for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, take care.